And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show on the Batchelor News Radio Network, WCOM in Chapel Hill, IBM TV, Big Mind Entertainment. If you have a Fire Stick, you can watch it there. You can also watch us on YouTube at LA Batchelor. And coming up next week, you can watch the show on Roku as well as the Batchelor News Radio Network on the Batchelor News Radio Show. And of course, the audio version you can catch at thebachelornews.airtime.pro. I want to bring in my guest. Good to have her on again. She is the host of a dose of a dime with Yanni Knox. It airs every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. She is Yanni Knox. Yanni, I appreciate you, sis, coming on.
Hey, how are you doing today?
Good, good, good. Listen, I wanted to have you on. You had such a tremendous, profound show. You always do, but this particular show, a couple of days ago, I really wanted to sort of follow up with my audience. A
Okay.
couple of topics. First being roadblocks that people have in their relationships, and there are a lot of different things that people have. I think I've mentioned to you before, some people live by the 80-20 rule. If I get
Right.
80% of what I desire in my mate, I can live without the 20. um,
Mhm.
but what are some of the roadblocks that can hinder not even a relationship that's been established, but if you're single and you're feeling someone, right, and you're trying to get there, what are some of the roadblocks that we sort of um, self-impose on ourselves?
Well, okay, so that's a fair question. So, when we're dating, especially when we're dating and we're just now establishing a relationship, we want to make sure that we're in a space in our life, a place in our life where we actually can establish a relationship and be present with the other person. Stuff that happens in our life, whether you lose a job, you gain a job, even just a positive stress of moving, can put you in a space where you don't want to be as communicative as normal. So, those types of things can lead to some situations where you're just not in a good space to date. And definitely when you're in a relationship, it can definitely wreak havoc because you're not communicating with the other person. You don't want to bother them with the drama that's going on. But the problem is that communication is king. You got to do it. So definitely that life, definitely lack of healthy communication. I think I talked about also fighting fair, which is a concept that I took from the other radio show that I'm on. But I dove more into it as to some of the things that I normally see couples doing when they fight, and like going tit for tat, like being disrespectful, like bringing up stuff that they just really shouldn't, like disrespectfully calling each other names, stuff like that, and definitely taking each other for granted and working out their trust issues. And if you're not doing it prior to the relationship, you definitely need to do it when you get into that relationship. And the number one thing is unrealistic expectations.
There was three areas I was preparing for this interview
Mm.
that I talked to people before, and it was three areas that we all collaborated on. One was the number one I got was competing with your partner's needs. Um, you
Hmm.
know, is that delve into that in particular? Is that a selfish thing that causes the roadblocks? In other words, if we're more concerned about our needs rather than the others, is that selfish? Is that one of those that will cause a breakup?
It depends. If you are crystal clear, if your communication skills are on par and you let them know, hey, this is what I'm going through, and I might need to pull back and I need to focus on this, definitely that's something that I feel like won't necessarily destroy the relationship if both people are mature. But if you're not communicating and you're just pulling back and you're just drifting apart, then yeah, definitely that will be something that might destroy the relationship or create problems later on.
I just got a and they didn't put their name in here, but I'm gonna put this on the screen so you can see it. and they said don't. I think they said don't settle. Can you
Mm,
see that? Okay.
yeah.
Your thoughts on what they said?
So it says don't settle on a plan until both of you are happy. I call that over compromising. We tend to try and compromise to make things work and make our partner happy, but you should not agree to a plan until you are sure both parties are going to get something out of that agreement. We compromise all the time, and most of the times, a lot of us, those especially those of us who are helpers and that kind of a nurturers in a relationship, we'll just say that, tend to compromise ourselves into a fault. And then we end up not being happy with what it is that we compromised ourselves with. So, yeah, definitely do not, you have to make sure that you have compromise so that both parties win, not just one.
What would be the sort of the I guess the love advice on that to to get around that? Because a lot of people say, well, I want to be able to please my mate, but I also don't want to lose myself at the same time. So what's
Well,
the
you shouldn't have
balance?
one shouldn't bother the other.
Okay.
If pleasing your mate means that you're self-sacrificing, then you need to look at how it is that you love. And if you're investing more of yourself into the relationship than they are, and if you're investing more of yourself into the relationship than you are investing into yourself, yeah, that's going to end up being one, it develops a codependent relationship, which you do not want to be in because, I mean, granted, most relationships to a certain extent are codependent, meaning like they lean on each other. But most of the time, if there's somewhat of too much of a codependency going on, that ends up being a problem later on. Especially if you can't just, if you do need that break, if they decide they need to work on them and you were wholeheartedly focused on the relationship and not on yourself, it does leave you in a precarious situation where you're going to end up losing stuff. You're going to end up losing everything, all your goals. So yeah, you also want to work on you. That is part of growth. You can't just work on a relationship.
But I guess what I'm asking is how do you know if you're going overboard in terms of pleasing your mate at the same time not losing yourself and having those boundaries,
That's
you know?
easy.
Okay.
It's a dread. If you dread doing the things that you would normally look forward to for your mate, then yeah, you're doing too much and you need to pull back. So definitely, if there is a dread that's going on, like you feel like you're like it used to be for me. If they called me and they said, "Hey, what are you cooking?" I automatically felt dread. Like I cook and I cook a lot, but if I'm not cooking for you, I'm cooking for my family. And if you just happen to be in the vicinity and you eat, that's fine. But I'm not cooking for you. So when it comes to that, when it comes to that sense of an entitlement, like you do this, so I deserve it, and you're not doing for yourself, that's when you kind of cross that line. You have to be in a space where loving them feels good to you. And if it doesn't feel good, if it feels like a chore, then yeah, you're doing too much.
Talking with Yanni Knox here, a dose of the dime with Yanni Knox. That airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. on the
I
Batchelor.
wanted to add, hold on. And if there's no reciprocation, like if I'm wholeheartedly doing and you're not receiving that same that you're doing for the other person, that might also make you feel drained as well. Sorry, go ahead. Give me
No,
one more.
that's fine. Because of what I was going to say, then you brought up a point about cooking. If you're in the vicinity, yeah, you can get a plate. Is
Mm-hmm.
that in the we're dating exclusive stage, or we're just getting to know stage? I mean, when you've been with someone, say, 6 months, whatever the case may be, a lot of stuff comes kind of natural. Like, okay, I'm making dinner, you can come by and get a plate, as opposed to if you're in the area, you can get a plate.
Mm-hmm. It depends on you, and what you have set up. And again, how you feel about what it is that you're doing. Again, if you feel like you being put out, then yeah, you need to pull back. You're doing too much. If you feel like you're not getting the same reciprocity that you're giving out, you need to pull back. I did get a private chat asking what if the compromise is one sided.
Right.
I want to make sure I say that we do not over compromise. A one sided compromise is not a compromise, it's somebody getting their way. So you guys have to, if you decide to meet in the middle, and then somebody changes where the middle is, then it's then within your right to recompromise, because you want to make sure that it works for both parties. That's what a compromise is. I get some of what I want, you get some of what you want, and we meet in the middle and we both win. But if one person's winning, that's not a compromise. That's somebody winning.
Well, I mentioned this on your, someone had text on your show, I should say, about um, someone who's doing too much,
Mm-hmm.
where it gets annoying. Like if they watch, you had mentioned even yourself when you were dating and you watch somebody's clothes and you messed up his, turned it into a different color. When a mate takes initiative to do
Yeah.
something with all the good reasons, but they screw it up anyway.
Yeah, that can happen. I'm sorry, that was a funny memory. But yeah, won't ever do that again. And it was funny. Yeah, I had just learned how to wash clothes. It was a whole other situation. So yes, um, the question was, when people are when a mate takes the initiative to do something for you and it was too much, what do you do?
Right.
And communication again is key. Even if they mess something up, because I got yelled at. Listen, and within reason, I understand it was their favorite
You
jacket.
mess my clothes up, you might get yelled up too.
So yeah, within reason, of course. Like I said, with that being said, it's all about knowing the intent versus the impact. If you know that the intent was to do something nice and it all falls apart, because I have seen some situations where they really, really tried to do some good stuff and it just all fell apart for no good reason at all. You have to understand, as a person looking at the intent, they intended to be nice, they intended to be sweet, they intended to do something positive, and the impact, well, it all blew up. It was all a problem. It did not work. But I knew where you were coming from, so it's okay. And that comes also with maturity and dealing with people who are not just in it for what they can get out of a relationship, but what they can share as a couple, because that's a memory. Honestly, if we had stayed together 20 years from now, he'd have brought that up and we'd have laughed about it, because
um,
it's funny. I laughed about it.
so she followed up. If you could see it in the private, you can answer that.
Okay. So Sophia Honeycutt was saying that what if the compromise is one-sided? And she's going on to ask, what if would it be selfish if it's always that they ask for only their focus? Yes, sis. And they never ask what you want or feel. I think you've answered your own question. Here's the thing, and I put this in the chat and Dose of the Dime Facebook group, which you guys are more than welcome to join, because it's a public group and we talk about hot topics all the time. But in there, we talked about just the fact that you're asking the question is a red flag. If you know in your heart of hearts that every compromise ends up being completely one sided and you're not getting any reciprocity out of it, then yeah, you need to be like, hey, I am willing to compromise with you. I know you love me, if that is what you know, and that's a relationship. But this does not feel fair to me. And I don't want to say that you're being selfish, but can we make sure that when we compromise, it works out for both you and me? Because it can't just be just you. Because if I always feel like I'm doing the work, then it means that I always feel like I'm on the hot seat, and that's not fair for our relationship.
But
And
let me
that's
ask you this: even on a personal note, just going back in my, I don't normally do this, but just so I've had someone that would do things you didn't ask them to do it, they do it,
mm-hmm.
and they screwed it up with the, you know, right? Um, but I know it was good intent, but
Right.
when you bring it to someone, or just put it out there more generally, when you bring it to the person's attention and they get defensive, how do you deal with that? I said, hey, I didn't ask you to do that, and it continues to happen.
Mm.
Then, and they get, well, I didn't mean to do, all of that. I know you didn't mean to do it. I'm just bringing it to your attention, and they get upset and all of that. How do you handle that kind of stuff?
Okay, so for me, I would say, listen, love, That was very, very sweet. The intent was so very sweet, and I appreciate everything that you did. However, this is my boundary. I cannot have you do this because I like this a certain way. And so that you and I don't have problems next time, I would rather do that myself. I wholeheartedly appreciated the effort. But if you want to do something for me, here's some things that you can do, and you list them out.
Mm.
So if you want to be surprised, you can give them that surprise. Like somebody brought me flowers to my job. I didn't tell them where I worked. That's a problem.
Right.
And so I had to say, listen, my dear, you don't even know where I stay on purpose. Um, this is a boundary for me. And they can either accept that or they cannot. And here's the thing about boundaries. People who get angry about boundaries are normally people who want to walk all over them. People who are mature in their selves will normally be like, okay, I understand. This is my space, and we can grow here, because they're gonna have some boundaries too. They should, if it's a
Right.
mature relationship.
Right. And you know, if a person int- has good intentions and they do stuff for you
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't ask them, but they think it's one of those things where um, you're doing more for them. I mean, they're doing more for you than you're
Mm.
doing for them. How is that? Just in responding to the question, how is that being selfish? If I want to do something for Yanni and you
Mm-hmm.
ain't asked me to do it,
Mm-hmm.
how is that? You're doing more than I am because you took the initiative to do it. I didn't ask you to do it. You just did
Yeah,
it.
and that I go back to, what's the intention? Were you doing it to say that I did it, or were you doing it to make somebody happy?
Right.
If you're doing it with the intention of, look at all these things I did for you. Oh my God, yeah, hey, I love you. You should know I love you. Look at all these things I did. Or again, yeah, those are people that's stacking points. This is my score. This is
Right.
your score. And
Right.
that's not the kind of relationship that you want. You want someone that genuinely wants to see you happy, so they do things in an effort to see you happy, or in an effort to make your life easier, as in me trying to wash somebody else's clothes.
Right. And love doesn't keep score, right?
No.
Okay.
There and
So
there's never really a 50-50. There's normally 100-100.
right.
So unless you're talking finances, and then that's different.
Yeah, and I'm coming back to that. I'm glad you said, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
Talk with Yoni Knox here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Number two, relationship roadblock. I got number two was competing with your partner's needs,
What do you mean?
and essentially that might be what you just explained, and that you know um, and I think there's a difference, and you're the expert, Yoni, that when you say I need or maybe I want
Mm-hmm.
to be something different, and then it's all on how that person reacts to it and how they feel about it.
Like, forgive me an example.
Well, like if you say, man, my car broke down and I got to get some tires, and I'm already thinking, or the person's thinking, I'm going to go and get some tires, and before you get the tires, somebody, your partner has already bought the tires. Now I didn't
Mhm.
ask you to do it, so you're putting my needs ahead of yours, but then you get upset if it's not reciprocated.
And then going back into, what is the intention of what it is that you're doing? Are you doing it simply because you need them to have tires? Or are you doing it simply to make a show of, look how I take care of you? If you're doing it as a show, because you shouldn't. The fact is, I mean, if you can't afford new tires for your car and your car needs it and they need new tires too, if you can't afford both of them, you shouldn't be doing both of them. You do have to take care of yourself first, unless you are married, and that is, y'all are sharing, and then y'all can share a car, because I mean that your unit then. But if you're just dating and you're in a relationship, you have to look at, okay, so what am I trying to do? What is my intention? If your intention is to show I could take care of you, and you're not taking care of yourself, that means eventually they're going to have to take care of you. because you're not taking care of your needs.
Is it a roadblock when, or I should say, a warning sign? Because you always talk about warning signs when you're in a relationship, even in the early stages, and you're feeling this person, and let's say you own a business, Shawnee, you're successfully doing your thing, and you have someone that is not as successful. So certainly they're trying to either compete with you,
Oh,
or
no, we
they're
don't want
or
nobody
they're
competing.
right. So if they do that, or they're negative because you have a business and they work in a 9 to 5, is that a red flag to leave them alone?
Yes.
Okay.
And specifically because I've come from a family where that worked. My mother was an RN. My father, he worked. He had his own business, but he did not make nearly as much as she made. And not only was he the head of the household, and very much so, she was submissive to him. But there was never any arguments about this role. She submitted naturally to him, even though he made lesser money than him and he was younger than him. So that to me is a red flag. If you're not confident in yourself enough to know that what you do matters, or if you're working on your goals, your whatever it is that you're going, that you know that you have to bust your butt a little bit in order to get where everyone else is, and be okay in that space, and then look at me, the person that you're supposed to be trying to court or date or love, and be like, well, you got more. That's not going to work. That's going to lead to resentment. That's going to lead to arguments for nothing. That's what those little silly arguments about you put too much salt in the pesto, that type of argument. That's what those little arguments come from, because you're just mad and you don't know where to put it.
So heterosexually, at least,
Yes.
um,
Now, I couldn't speak
you're
on the other one. I would love to read an article about that. That would be
well. I
interesting.
was going to say heterosexually, you're basically saying, from like your parents' standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
that he made less, but he was still the man. He was still the head
Right.
of the house, and your mother respected that.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
And,
because
and I was raised in gender roles.
okay,
So definitely, what's funny is his profession, his major profession, the one that he's, God bless, talented at, was to be a chef. But my mom grew up in mom made dinner, so he would just sit and eat, and yeah, it would be interesting to hear the conversations about what she could have put in there.
how much of that, from a guy standpoint, and you've been as a guy, you raised as, okay, yeah, as a man, you're the head of the household.
Hmm.
Women can certainly have their career and implement. Your parents are the perfect example. How much of it will be a deal breaker if a man meets a woman that doesn't want to kind of be in that situation? In other words, you ain't gonna tell me what to do. I make more money, so whatever the case may be.
It depends on the person. Everybody's relationship is different. That's the one thing that I have acknowledged. And there's not one way to make anything work. I have a friend who is an accountant. She makes 6 figures. She met a man in Jamaica, fell in love. She brought this man back. He is very good at cooking. It's almost the flip side of my mom and my dad's situation. So she makes 6 figures. He decided to stay home with the kids, and it makes sense for their relationship. And I have not ever heard of them ever having problems, and they've been at it for over 10 years. So it just depends on what you are seeking in your relationship. Now, for that attitude that you was putting out when you were saying the question, like, I don't need your money and I make more money, you can't. Yeah, you would really have to have a very submissive man to complement that type of attitude. I feel like those women who are successful within themselves don't need to put anybody down.
Right. With
And
that,
I think that's asking to be by yourself.
right. And I'm glad you said it, because the dogs, they watch your show and they listen, like,
Oh, I bet they have. Listen, you know what she said last time? Man, listen, I be trying to be neutral. I'm neutral.
and you get it on your Facebook page too. I know you
I
get that.
do.
You do. Yeah,
Mm-mm,
you do. Roadblock number 3, and you
mm-mm,
touched on this, the habit of criticism and fault finding. And I
mm-mm.
think too, Yoni, speak to that, especially when it comes to um, sometimes we say things we don't mean, but if we
Hmm.
continue to say it, that could be a problem. That negativity, I mean, I don't think anybody's immune to that.
No.
Um, but how do you get through that? How do you work with your spouse to say, listen, without being offensive, that you way over the top with that.
Okay, so obviously, for those of us who are a little weathered, have been through a couple of seasons, we know a little bit more about ourselves than most people do, or like the younger kids, the younger guys coming up. It is honestly start with knowing what you feel when you start getting into a conversation with the person that you're dating, and you feel attacked, whatever that feeling is for you, whether it be in the pit of your stomach, whether it be in your chest, or whether it be you start getting hot, know that feeling. Know that it might be time to walk away. That's number one. So if you know yourself enough to say, hey, this is getting out of hand, then you know, okay, you know what, babe? We need to pause this and we need to take a break and come back because we're going to get into a space where I'm going to say something that I might regret, or you're going to say something that you might regret. And you have to fight fair. So that's going to maintain your relationship. Everybody's going to fight. I need to say this, and I hope everybody hears this. You will fight in your relationship. It's just, it will happen. It's how you fight that makes the difference. So, number one, check yourself. When you start feeling like you're about to get out of control, then pause it and then walk away. But the flip side of that is when you see her getting out of control, you or them getting out of control, you say, hey, this is you're getting into a space that's unnecessary. Maybe we need to table this and come back.
I want to just kind of follow up on that. I'm a little older than you, but I think we both have the upbringing in terms of we've heard the old timers say, stick with it. It just push through it. But
Mm,
where's the balance? Where's the enough is enough? I mean, especially if you're married or you have a spouse and you love them, you're gonna argue, like you said.
yeah.
It's inevitable. But when is enough enough? I mean, you don't want to, that old saying, you don't want to go to bed, angry and that kind of thing. When is enough enough? When there's that fighting and yeah,
Oh, we
I love
paused.
you, I love you too. When do you stop doing that?
Okay, so eventually it's not just about love. If you are unhappy, if it makes your life unhappy to be with that person, like if when they call you're not getting butterflies anymore, the pit of your stomach is falling because you're like, now what? Then it might be time to start looking at the front door, start making your exit plan, and start, being honest with them and saying, hey, babe, this ain't working. We need to either do something different or we need to call it a day. But it's not, and I have a comment over here saying it's not necessarily the fighting that gets everybody in trouble. It's how you fight. And that's what I was saying, fighting fair. No name calling. You should never be name calling ever. Ever, ever, ever in a relationship. There should never even be a reason to name call your spouse, your mate, your person you're talking to. It does not matter. Even selfish, saying they're selfish, that's name calling. So what you want to say is, I feel like you're not thinking about me. Versus, man, you selfish. The minute that you point, the minute that you say never, always, it's no longer a conversation. You're getting ready to get into a fight. That's what it is. Real talk. So when you are unhappy, and the minute that you see this person or you can't go a day without an argument, and it's either sex or an argument, that's when you need to start looking at other options. And I don't mean other people. I mean moving out of the relationship.
Two quick ones. I have my other guest on, but two quick ones.
Oh,
Number one, when you look at finances, now at that point you're in a relationship. If you're talking
mhm.
finances, when is that a deal breaker?
And
When it's
finances
one
is the
sided.
number one.
Okay, go ahead.
Outside of adultery, finances is the number one reason for arguments within a couple. And so you need to have, and it's not a woman thing, it's not a man thing. You need to have the person that's most fiscally responsible in charge of the money.
Right.
And especially when you're in a long term relationship, your goal is to grow. not to plummet and be less and be worse off than you were. So definitely it's not a woman or man thing, that is not a gender role thing. Whoever is in charge of the money needs to be the person that is the best with the money, period. So yes, anytime that it puts you in a space where you are having to make amendments with your own money when you didn't have to before, then that's the time when you need to have a serious conversation,
Mm,
because you can do bad by yourself. And I think that's where men and women, the independent woman, gets the negative backlash, because we can do bad by ourselves.
that's
So it's
right.
not a big deal for us to be gone if somebody's messing up the money. But then men find that as, oh, well, she's too independent for me. No, brother, we don't want to struggle.
Right. And that's real talk. Like, I mean, you have to be secure as a man to be able to handle
And
that.
it's
I mean,
vice versa. If she
right.
messing up the money, if you got budgets for things and she's blowing the budget every other month, that's a problem. And it needs to have a ethical, non-name calling, calm conversation about, babe, where are we trying to go?
Might be some F bombs and some other bombs that might,
If you blowing my budget, yeah.
and yeah. And Nick, I'm going to get to you, sir. But I got stuff rolling in, Yoni. I got to get to. So, what about when you have two households
Mm,
and both those, um, they both you both have children,
yeah,
and you want to, if you're really serious about it, you want to bring them sort of the Brady Bunch type thing, or bring them
yeah.
together. When is that? Um, when should that happen? And if where's the deal breaker? In I'll just give you again an example, that I was in a relationship and she wanted to introduce me to her kids right away. Like, no, why would you do that? Like, if we don't
Mm.
work, now you got to
How
explain to
how
your
far
kids.
is right away?
Well, 6 months. For me, I just thought that was too soon. Maybe you
Okay.
think it's a
How
little
old
bit.
were the kids?
They were young. I think one was 8 and one was 10 or something like that. For me,
Okay.
I just thought it was too soon, and
Okay.
so and she had a problem with that, so it didn't work. So when do you know when to bring that whole thing, that whole dynamic, and you have those kids, because kids, they have nothing to do with it. You start bringing people around, then hey, it sets an example, a bad example, that you just bringing some woman or some man around your kids, number one. And then number two, that person won't be there. Then you got to go back and explain why they might have got connected with that person. When is it a good time to do so?
Okay. So honestly, I do have kids, and when I got divorced, I was single and celibate for 5 years, trying to work on me, trying to make sure the kids and I had it together. But when I started dating again, I made it a rule never to introduce people into my children's life until I was serious about them,
Right.
meaning that they were going to be around. And at that point, it would need to be, now listen, it's going to be different. It's 3 months. And let me explain why. I don't want to get so far into you and you so far into me that if I introduce you to my kids and they don't like you, that it's a problem then.
Right.
I don't want it to be 6 months in or a year in and I introduce you and my son is like, I don't like him and I hate him and I don't want him around, because then I have to break up with you, and that's a whole heartbreak for me, because most single parents will tell you, my kids come first.
Right.
Maybe we could date after they're out of the house, but nonetheless, if my kids say no, it's a no. So I might introduce them, but they're not hanging out. They may hang out maybe, and that might be a 6 month timeline type of thing,
And
or a
hanging out
holiday type
meaning
of
not
thing.
at your house or in that.
No,
Right.
yeah, you can't be in
Gotcha.
my house. Like, I'll introduce
Right.
you. You can meet them. We might even start having a conversation about them. But no, you're not hanging out in my house, just because I have trust issues when it comes to children and grown people, and all people should have these type of boundaries when it comes to their kids, because you don't know who you're bringing up into your house. And I've heard too many stories as a therapist about, Uncle John, quote unquote, going up into, the little girl's bedroom and it being a
Right.
problem.
Right. Right.
So,
That's real talk. Um, a final question for you: when you look at whether people are married or or in a relationship with a spouse, you mentioned the word space.
Hmm.
How important is it the space? One of the people that emailed you um, on your show the other day said, "Well, he gave space to his girlfriend, but she
Hmm.
wanted to hang out, so there was nothing to see there when they got together." How do you determine the space, and how do you um, make sure that when there's no space, the absence makes your heart go founder? Like there's some excitement when you get back together.
You ain't gonna like my answer.
Uh
Because
oh.
there is no way to guarantee that you can have space and still have that person. Unfortunately, and I didn't want to say it on the air with that guy listening. I tried to in a nice way. Is if she's not with you, she's not with you. If she'd rather be with her friends, it doesn't matter if y'all were together or having space. That's her priority. So no, you cannot predict. You can only do what you feel like is best for the relationship, and you cannot control what they do. If they decide to take off, then you know that that's what the creator had planned in the beginning, that they were going to do it eventually. That's really, you cannot control them. You
So
cannot.
what? What's a good space then? What are some of the things that people can have in terms of having that space? Because you had talked about, I saw on your page about people living married and
Mhm.
living in separate households.
Right. So you again have to do what works best for your household, and for that household, living apart was one of the better ones. Now, of course, when I talked about this, the people that were on board with it were mostly professional older women who have careers set up, who have things going on, that sometimes having a relationship tends to cloud and bump that and make a problem. So definitely that you want to keep that in consideration. But when you're talking about space, you're talking about, and I had a person who even IM'd me later and said, hey, me and my husband were on the road to divorce, but we ended up sleeping in separate rooms, and operating as if we were roommates for a while, and it ended up saving our marriage. So sometimes space is the answer. But then of course there are people who space ends up being a problem for, because out of sight, out of mind. We want to say it grows fonder, but some people are out of sight, out of mind. And so then it's a whole other issue. So no, it goes back to who it is that you're in a relationship with. Is this a person that's willing to say, yes, I still love you, I still want to be with you, and I will go through this space with you because I want our relationship to work? They're going to stay. But if it's somebody that's giving you lip service, and they're not absolutely in agreement with what it is that's going on, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And there's nothing you can do to stop them. And then I go back to, do you really want to stop them if they're not for you?
Mm. I mean that's real talk. I mean, space or no space, if
Right.
they into their lifestyle and their friends and everything else, it doesn't really matter what they
Mm-hmm.
do. And that's a literal sense,
Yeah.
like you said, in that regard. Yanni, before you go, I appreciate your time. Let people know about your show and how they can follow you.
Okay, so my show is A Dose of the Dime. It's actually every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But however, you may choose to, come on whenever you want to. But we do have a Facebook group that I do encourage everybody to jump in and join, because we talk about the hot topics here. And it gives you a space to kind of think about some of the questions that may come up in relationships. Like, what happens if you're in a space where you need to um, separate for a while? We talked about that. What else did we talk about? It was one that was a big. What if you're not attracted to the person that you're with, but they
Yes.
treat you the way that you want to be treated? Is that somebody that you stay with? These are questions that you can ask yourself, and it helps you prepare and prep for a relationship. But definitely, there's interaction. There's no bullying, and I monitor the space, and we post questions every other day, maybe. But definitely jump on, and you can find me on all your forms of social media: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I'm not doing just therapy stuff on TikTok. So if you see me clowning, just know that it's after hours. And definitely ask me questions, man. I'm available.
Well, you were definitely available today, and I
And Central
certainly
Time.
Okay, you got to throw the Central. No, Eastern time, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern
Only if
time.
I'm in Florida.
See, anyway, appreciate you. Thank you so much this evening, and thanks for the insight.
No problem. Have a blessed night.
You too.
I'll tell you what freedom is to me. No fear. I mean, really, no fear. If I could have that half of my life, no fear. Lots of children have no fear. That's the closest way, that's the only way I can describe it. That's not all of it, but it is something to really, really feel.
Nina Simone, 1933 to 2003. Nina Simone was a pianist, singer, and activist. Nina, born Eunice Wayman, grew up in a home where music was all around. A prodigy with a love of Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven, she dreamed of becoming the first black concert pianist. Activism, however, was as much a part of her as her music was. At age 12, when Eunice's parents were removed from the front row of one of her recitals to make room for a white couple, she stood up and refused to play until the injustice was corrected. The event left her hardened and distrustful, but demonstrated the power of activism through music. As a young adult, financial troubles and discrimination got in the way of her studies, so Eunice began giving piano lessons. She soon learned that she could earn double the money by performing in nightclubs in Atlantic City. When nightclub owners informed her that playing the piano was not enough, she had to become a singer. She took the name Nina Simone and began to sing. Was there any way of knowing then that hers would become the most iconic voices in the history of music? On stage, her musical genius really showed. She combined different genres and styles, rejecting labels and defying categorization. She mixed jazz, folk music, and blues, and always had a soft spot for classical piano. Nina used her music to stand up for social justice, writing songs in response to the assassination of civil rights leader Medgar Evers and the Birmingham church bombing. She became a leading voice in the civil rights movement while her songs served as its soundtrack.
Welcome back to the show. We thank you for joining us here, the Batchelor News radio show. Want to bring in my guest. Always good to have him on. He is the owner of Anastas Media. He's play-by-play voice of UMass Lowell. He is Nick Anastas. And Nick, always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. And thank you for your patience too, by the way, sir.
No problem. I was enjoying the program, so glad to be on.
Well, you're a single. Well, I would say a young guy, and so it's good to hear those little signs and roadblocks and stuff for relationships.
I was taking some notes for sure.
I figured you would say something along those lines. You're a young man. Speaking of who's not young, and in terms of football, he's younger than me at least. That'd be Tom Brady. What is the real chances of Brady going to the stop in his area? He's from San Mateo, which is California. 49ers there. Obviously, the Rams have Stafford. Obviously, the Chargers have Herbert. So, Jimmy might be gone. What's your thoughts with Brady coming out and going there? And if he does, is it this year or he takes a year off? What do you think happens there?
My money is still on that he retires and stays retired. It's hard to predict. I've been wrong along the timeline really all along, so I wouldn't put too much stock in my own answer. But when you take a look at the Niners, I think Jimmy G is probably on the way out either way. With Trey Lance behind him, the Niners, moved up in the first round to get him. They used a lot of draft capital on him last year. They sat him for a year. There were reports even as early as camp last year that he was ready, to compete for the opening day starting job. That never materialized. Jimmy G played all right, good enough, especially in the second half of the season. But a lot of San Francisco fans feel like he's the last thing that's holding him back.
Right.
The feeling was going into the game, okay, if we have the lead in the fourth quarter, is Jimmy going to throw a turnover?
Right.
So I feel like, and you factor in the fact that he's making it still a ton of money. The Lance thing is real. I mean, that should be the direction of the future. And if the timetables hold up, then I would expect Lance to be the starter at some point this year, if that's opening day or not. So I'm not sure where Tom Brady fits into that equation. You got a guy who's going to be 45 years old. You throw him in the mix. It can't be any longer than a 1-year deal. I can't imagine the Niners throwing 2 years at him. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a football standpoint, in my opinion. Now, on the other side of the argument, okay, you argue Brady steps in and he's an automatic upgrade over both of those guys, Jimmy G and Trey Lance, on day one. I suppose, that argument makes somewhat sense. But again, the guy is 45 years old. There were some signs I felt last year where they hit some stumbling blocks. The fact they were shut out in December against the Saints, is probably the forefront answer. I mean, his arm isn't what it was. I know I've been saying that. It sounds like a broken record, but at some point, Father Time catches up.
Well, and I have to ask you that, Nick, because you and I both have been saying,
right,
Father Time. But Father Time hadn't caught up with him yet.
Right.
So, I mean, when do we need to just go Father Time is on his time rather than on our time, where we keep saying this is going to happen? And he led the league in yards last year, 5,000. Like, I mean, why wouldn't San Fran go, hey, can you come out and help us?
That's a good point, but again, at what cost? I mean, again, that's a big gamble, in my opinion. It just is, and I know Brady's the exception to the rule in a lot of cases. But if you're the Niners front office, you ask yourself, is it worth scrapping everything that we've been planning on for the last year and a half?
Right.
It may be. I don't have an answer definitively one way or the other. I still lean that he stays retired. I think the whole thing has been kind of strange in terms of how he's handled it, to be honest with you. Everything from his, the announcement being leaked ahead of time, right? Then his agents are kind of scrambling, saying, well, it's not official. And then he comes out, the whole, Patriot snub thing. During the announcement is a whole other story to itself.
Which is not really a big, to me, not a big deal. Like, I mean, he already had said that when he went to Tampa, I love,
I suppose, sure, maybe here nor there, but I still think it's strange either way.
Yeah.
It kind of fits into that overall pattern. And then, of course, a few days later, it's, the door's not completely shut. And here come the 49er rumors. So the whole thing has been, again, the word strange. But again, the Niners have to ask themselves, is it really worth rolling the dice, scrapping everything they've had in place from a planning perspective, to roll the dice on a guy that's going to be 45 years old doing something unprecedented? I'm not sure the answer is yes.
So,
In that
when you
scenario.
say scrapping, though, you're saying that because they'll have to give up some picks to get him, if because Tampa owns his rights, so they got to give up picks. They got Trey Lance there, and I'm assuming that if you know Nick Anastas is the GM and he traded up for Trey Lance, and you go to the owner and say, hey, now I want to bring in Brady, that's an issue. All of that.
You're right. I mean, again, from the dollars and cents perspective, it's two ways, right? You mentioned the draft picks, you mentioned the roster building, which would be affected. The timetable with the heir apparent at quarterback would be affected. Obviously, though, they get an immediate boost by having Tom Brady on the scene. They're going to sell a whole lot of jerseys right out of the bat, right? Obviously,
Right.
the Niners would get a fraction of that every jersey sold. So, the merchandising aspect, I'm sure they would get boost in terms of the number of nationally televised games, the primetime games, the Sunday nights, the Monday nights. They'd get a boost there. So, their visibility would increase for sure, which helps the franchise. But again, from a football operation standpoint, it's a gamble, to say the least.
You're one of the few people who look at it from that standpoint, because everybody, Nick, is like, yeah, oh my God, Brady, 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 and they're not looking long term. You're one of the
Right.
few that actually come out and say, that option. What about when you look at um, the NFC? Because for me, I picked before the Super Bowl, before the season start, I picked the Rams and the Chiefs. Chiefs let me down. I thought the Rams would win. They did. I'm picking the same teams. So when you look at just from the NFC standpoint, Tampa needs a quarterback. They may lose Godwin. They may lose some other people, whatever. You look at, I mean, the Rams and if Aaron Donald's coming back and whatever the case may be, um, I think that division in itself in the South with the Saints and everything, everybody seems to need a quarterback in that division. And then you look at the Cardinals. Who would you say right now? And it could change, of course, with all see with the trades and free agencies. Who'd you say in the NFC would be your favorite?
I agree with your premise. I think the conference overall is in flux. I think there's more unknowns in the NFC than in the AFC.
Right.
I mean, we could start there. I don't particularly like forecasting anything before the draft.
Right.
Because, especially amongst the four sports, I think the draft has the most impact on the NFL. So I don't like talking predictions until May or June. But I will say this: there's a more uncertainty in the NFC. The examples you just named are all true. When I'll throw some more on there. Dallas, again, a team that has talent on paper, but hasn't been able, for whatever reason, to make that postseason leap. That's
whatever reason, Nick. I mean, two reasons. Jerry Jones, like, sit down, and you 80 years old, sit down and just get a football guy in there, not your son, by the way, not nepotism. Get unless he's going to be objective. Sit down and let your team be run by a football guy. Dallas will never, and I'm a Dallas hater. I'm a Steelers fan. My brother's a Dallas fan. Dallas will never, ever sniff a Super Bowl until Jerry Jones sit down and leave them alone, Nick. Period.
Yeah, you sound exactly like my father. Allow me to defend Jerry Jones for a second.
Oh, geez.
Again, you gotta have an open mind if you're gonna if I'm gonna do it. I'm not sure he's the problem. Now, again, I think they've drafted well recently. I think they've assembled a good team again on paper. it's been more about Mike McCarthy slash Garrett. I think on field than sure, okay, they had a bad defense for a while, but I think that's improved, especially with Micah Parsons there, a Jerry Jones pick, by the way. So again, I'm not sure if the front office is the problem, because they're stacked with talent every year. So you could say what you want about Mike McCarthy, and he got out coached in that San Francisco loss without a question.
Right.
So again, the bottom line is that the Cowboys are going to face that constant question, no matter how many games they win in the regular season. Until they actually win in the playoffs, that unknown is going to hang over their heads, and rightfully so. You look at the rest of that division, I think is a joke. Washington is mediocre at best. That's an organization. You want to talk about a GM that needs to go? We can start with Washington. They don't draft well. They don't have a quarterback. Philly, they're old. They got old quick, especially on defense. I feel like they need a rebuild there. The Giants are a disgrace. You mentioned the Saints. I don't know what to expect without Sean Payton down there. I'm not high on Doug Marrone at all, as we've talked about. He must be one hell of an interviewer, because he keeps popping up with no resume whatsoever.
I just think, though, Jerry Jones, Nick, is the one who hired Mike McCarthy, is the one who kept Jason Garrett around.
True.
So, your father, I didn't get it. Like,
right.
Jerry Jones is the one that's bringing the coaches in. Yeah, obviously he's got Cooper and all these guys, Lamb, and I get it, but somebody's got to be able. I used to say with Joe Torre. Joe Torre was the best manager for the Yankees because he was able to manage talent. You got to get a coach that manages talent.
Right.
And he keeps hiring the wrong guys. And when he had the right guys, his ego got in the way. Bill Parcells, Jimmy Johnson.
Right.
So that's the issue with them when you look at the landscape on the AFC side. I know what Joe Burrow did, and I know we run out of time, but I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes. Now, I'd heard that there was some rumors about some friction between Eric Bieniemy and Mahomes. They just re-signed Bieniemy for a 1-year extension or something like that. So you look at them and you look at Buffalo as you cover the AFC East. Again, outside of the trades and all of that free agency happens right now, who would you say is the team to beat in the AFC?
Still the Chiefs until further notice. I know the Bengals got by them with one heck of a second half, and frankly a collapse in the second half by the Chiefs. But
yeah,
I think that's the exception of the rule. I still think the Chiefs, having been to 4 straight AFC championships, sets the bar. And until they're beaten consistently, until the path to the Super Bowl does not run through Arrowhead, then they continue to be the favorite. We'll see. I mean, obviously, I think other teams have made grounds. You mentioned the Bengals. I think that defense caught lightning in a bottle. They had some adequate pass rush. I think on the offensive side in the Super Bowl, the problem you had talked about all season caught up with them, that offensive line,
right,
where they were sacked 4, 5, 6 times or whatever it was.
Right.
So, they need to improve to repeat in the AFC. And I'm not saying they can't. Obviously, Burrow is still getting better, which is scary.
Right.
Those receivers are still getting better, which is scary. And Joe Mixon finally got to showcase his worth after being, I feel, kind of slept on the first 4 or 5 years in the league. So, yeah, they're automatically in that top tier. Obviously, the Bills are explosive. That defense has been good for a while. Can they stay good? I felt like they had a good draft last year to infuse some youth on the defensive edge. They've got some other aging needs. They got to re-sign people. They got to get White healthy again at corner. So the Bills are right there. Josh Allen is as good as anybody right now. Anybody. I mean, he's proven that by going toe-to-toe with Mahomes. The Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and then you have probably the second tier would include the Titans. I'm not sure if they're dynamic enough offensively, and I feel like they're still a piece away defensively. But again, the draft still lies ahead, so they can improve there. Vrabel's a pretty good coach. Pretty good, I say. I don't think he's a great coach, but I think he's a good coach.
Right.
Then you have Belichick, obviously. Another year of Mac Jones. So there's room for growth there, obviously, with New England. So it's usually the same list of contenders, right? The same usual suspects in the AFC the last few years. I mean, it's the same 4, 5, 6 teams that seemingly are in the hunt. So, again, I think there's more unknowns in the NFC than in the AFC as we approach the draft.
I will quickly. I know Chris King is on and Tony T. McLean is up here. They may have a question for you, but I have 2 quick questions before you go to get to Chris. Number one, what do you think Pittsburgh should go in terms of their quarterback position? I want no part of Carson Wentz. I want no part of any Ryan Fitzmagic, which is really a interception for a touchdown waiting to happen. I want no part of that. Jimmy, we can debate whatever. So, what do you think they'll do there? And then the other question is with Belichick. Listen, I don't know. I think it might be sooner or later that Brady might win an 8th rather than Belichick win a 7th. So, what do you think about that? Does he ride out in the sunset, maybe make another playoff, and then retire, pass it on, sort of like Coach K is doing with Shire? What do you think happens in New England quickly?
All right, let's start with Pittsburgh. I don't think there's a veteran answer. I don't think there's a free agent answer.
Okay.
There. I think they just have to swallow it. Go ahead and swallow it.
Man, you asking Pittsburgh fans to swallow losing.
I think they're going to have to because they've kicked the can down the road and now their backs are to the wall. I think the last couple of off seasons there were free agent answers out there, but with Ben, keep saying I'm coming back. That kind of forced management into a corner somewhat. So now I think the answer is they go ahead and use some draft capital on one of these quarterbacks. I know it's not a strong quarterback class in direct comparison to 2021 or 20 or whatever. It's kind of a weak class overall, but that's the way it is. I don't see a veteran answer. Unless again you're going to go for one of these 3rd-tier guys that you just named as a 1-year stopgap. I'm not sure if the answer is there. So, unfortunately, I think you probably get a rookie quarterback who cuts his teeth on the job, baptism by fire. You hope Mike Tomlin and that coaching staff can, string together enough to keep you competitive in December. But I don't know. That's just the way I see it right now. In terms of New England, it's year 2 now, I guess 2.5 post Brady. We knew that first year was going to be rough. Cam Newton didn't really fit in. You get Mac Jones. I think in a lot of ways he was ahead of schedule. He seems like he's got a veteran poise. He's got good footwork in the pocket, makes good decisions. So I think folks are high around Jones up here for a reason. And, he had him at 9 and 7. They seemingly peaked too soon. They got on that win streak about 2/3 of the way through the season, where you ideally hope you're playing your best football at the end of the regular season. That didn't happen with New England. So they spent a ton of money last offseason, as we know, to kind of improve and bolster the starters. But that's usually the not the course of action. That I think is the exception to the rule. New England doesn't typically spend a whole lot of money in the offseason. I don't think that'll happen this year. I think they go back to the draft, acquire picks. I don't think they're done in that regard, and try to influx, the roster with more young players is typically how Belichick does it. So, I think they've started something. I think the rebuild or the post Brady era is on schedule. And, I expect them to be back in the playoffs. And then, as we know, anything can happen, especially in year 2 of a quarterback with Mac Jones.
Chris or Tony, you have questions for Nick?
I just got in here a few minutes ago, so I didn't catch everything you were talking about. I know you keep talking about how you picked the Rams. I know Tony's tired of hearing about that.
Well, I mean, Nick covers the Patriots and New England. So Celtics, Patriots, that kind of thing. So Red Sox, all New England type stuff. So
I'd like to know what Nick thinks about UMass.
I know you're a Bills guy, so
Right. I was just curious what Nick thought about UMass Lowell's chances with Vermont this weekend.
Oh,
okay. Well, Vermont's been the cream of the crop for a long time in the conference, and this year is really no exception.
They've done us a lot of favors this year. So
yeah, Vermont's got a good pipeline, especially to some of that upstate New York / Ontario area. Ontario, as we know, Toronto has been kind of a hotbed for recruits, and Vermont's got some guys from that area that seemingly produce year in and year out. So if UMass Lowell wins, then that's going to be a huge upset that would reverberate league wide. But they're definitely probably a double-digit underdog going in, and would have to play some good basketball. UMass Lowell, they're a little bit more veteran savvy than they've been, recently. Again, they're D1. I think this is season 9 since they made the jump up. They've shown progress every year. They made a run all the way to the conference final last year before falling to Hartford, which was a step forward. And again, they've got more seniors, more upperclassmen, more men, frankly, than underaged 18, 19-year-old kids. They've got now 22, 23-year-old guys that can rebound. They've got a rim protector named Max Brooks, who had 10 blocks in one game earlier this season against Albany. He's an athlete coming to his own. So they've got some firepower. They've got a chance, but Vermont is just so good at the mid-major level, at the America East level in particularly, that it's going to take a monumental effort, nearly a perfect game to knock off the Catamounts.
Yeah.
You see them making any kind of run in the America East tournament, or are we basically penciling Vermont in at this point?
I would pencil Vermont in until further notice. The Catamounts typically get some good competition from Stony Brook, but Stony Brook is leaving the conference and therefore is ineligible for the conference tournament. So Vermont's biggest hurdle has just been cleared, essentially, or traditionally anyway. So, yeah, I expect Vermont to win the conference, barring an upset. We did see an upset last year. They lost in the semifinals and were the favorite. But I think this Vermont team is better than last year's. So, yeah, it's Vermont's tournament to lose. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. And, I will say Hartford, being the Connecticut guy, we certainly root for them. But, Nick covers, he's the voice of UMass Lowell, and they always, I think, Nick, they play UConn quite a bit too, if I'm not mistaken, or at least from time to time.
Yeah.
Right. So they certainly always put up a good fight. Nick, as always, man, I appreciate your time. We'll talk with you next week. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, LA. Have a good
Yes,
weekend.
sir. Absolutely. Be well. Nick Anastas of Nassas Media, and as I mentioned, Chris and T, T, he is the voice, play-by-play voice for UMass Lowell. Um, Chris, I know you're short on time, so I want to start with you in terms of some of these games. But before I get to that, I got to ask you and Tony quickly. What is percentages, Chris? You say all the time, but I'm just in theory of this notion that first of all, I don't want to deal with Aaron Rodgers because he's just a attention seeker, and so is Tom Brady in a sense. But it makes a it makes some sense, Chris, if Brady has accomplished something in New England. He went to another spot and won a title. The only spot left is where he grew up loving Joe Montana, that be the 49ers. So, how realistic do you think, Chris, it is for him to come out of retirement? And he still hadn't put his papers in, by the way, but retire, come out, and go play for San Fran? And do you think it's this off season, or do you think it might be a year out?
I think at this point, unless Tom Brady wants to become the next version of Rocky Balboa, he'll stay retired. Um, Frankly, I don't see. I know that he's from the Bay Area and everything else, but I don't know if his wife will let him play football anymore. I mean,
Right.
that was part of the reason why he backed out in the first place. And how bad would Jimmy Garoppolo feel to know that you sat behind Brady in New England, then they traded you, and then you would be bumped out of San Francisco for Tom Brady? I think if that's the case, Jimmy Garoppolo would go and jump Tom Brady in an alley somewhere on his way out of town. Tony knows what I'm talking about. He's from Philadelphia. He knows what way things go with those kind of beatdowns.
Yeah. Tony, your thoughts. I mean, how realistic? I mean, we've seen guys come, they didn't put their papers in and then they play. So you think Brady's done it? If not, do you how realistic is him coming to San Fran, especially since John Lynch gave all these draft picks up for Trey Lance to be the next quarterback after Jimmy Garoppolo?
Um, I don't think he's coming back to San Fran. I don't want to see him or his skinny ass wife anymore. To be quite honest. So, yeah, just go home. Go home and just make bad commercials. Get out of our way, please.
On his yacht. Um, Chris, a couple of games. The Cleveland game at the time of this broadcast already happened, but it's some really good games. Want to get some thoughts on this. Boston and Chris and T. We had talked about how Boston's been so hot, and it's been about Smart getting the passes out, making sure guys get the ball in Tatum and Brown, and they've been lights out. They beat my Sixers by what 40 something points the last time they played Philly.
Yeah, and then they turned around and lost to the Pistons the next night.
Right, I got that, but I'm saying it's the NBA. They're at Brooklyn, a Brooklyn team that has this confidence now with Simmons coming in. You're going to be getting your best player back and Kyrie and all that kind of stuff. What say you about this game?
Do you want to go first, Tony, or do you want to
go? No, go.
Okay, I just didn't want to jump in front of anybody. That's all. Yeah, sure, the Nets are going to get Durant back, and they're going to have Irving, they're going to have Simmons, but the sad part is, none of those guys are playing today. So they've got a whole bunch of nothing, really. To quote Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, the Nets rotation right now is a big nothing burger, because I mean they signed Goran Dragic, who hasn't played since November.
Nice.
Now, what was the point of that? They got rid of DeAndre Bembry, who was a useful player,
right,
to sign Dragic. What's he going to do for you?
Yeah.
In this case, I like the Celtics. I know the line has gone up considerably. It was 6.5.
Way up.
Yeah, it's up to 9 now.
Chris, that scares me. The line's gone way up. That's what scares me.
Yeah, 9 is a little bit.
Too high.
Yeah,
Is
it's.
it at is it
I
at
like it a lot
Jersey?
better. Half.
Is the game at Jersey? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Is that
yeah, it's
Brooklyn?
at the park.
Brooklyn. Yeah, it's in Brooklyn. It's in Brooklyn.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that seems to be, I think it just speaks more to how folks aren't buying into the Nets than more than anything else.
Chris.
Yeah, I think Tony's right. I mean, people aren't going to buy into the Nets. They're definitely not going to buy into the Nets where you're going to be relying on Patty Mills and Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge or the ghost of LaMarcus Aldridge. Especially when you've got a Celtics team that's at full strength. Smart is supposed to play tonight after he left that game against Philadelphia with an ankle injury. Robert Williams is healthy. Tatum and Brown and Smart they're all there. I think they're in better shape than Brooklyn is at this point because, like you said, Simmons, Durant, Irving, Joe Harris still isn't back. You don't have Dragic, so it's a makeshift Nets lineup. I mean, I'm pretty sure if Tony could catch whatever train it is to get you up to the Barclays Center, he could probably suit up as their seventh guy tonight. I don't know if he'd want to play for the Nets, but I mean, he could probably be in the rotation.
And it's just the Dragic thing could be a good thing though, because he can shoot. So that might be a good thing. Why they did it the way they did it now, I don't understand. Atlanta and Chicago. This Bulls team has had some injuries. You look at what Trey's been doing. What say you on this game?
Well, the thing for Atlanta is they don't have John Collins, and
Right.
Collins is a big factor on both ends of the floor because Clint Capella is not anything what he was a couple of years ago. While the Bulls have injuries, like you said, Lonzo Ball's out, Caruso is out, Patrick Williams hasn't played since October. The fact remains that it's a Bulls team that's won 5 in a row. They're tied for the top spot in the Eastern Conference with Miami.
For now,
Both those teams are mash unit teams because Miami's gotten by without Adebayo and Butler and Morris and all those guys for extended periods too. The Bulls are favored by 3. This line hasn't really moved. I think it was 3.5 earlier, so it's gone down half a point, which isn't that bad. But here's the thing: Atlanta is about as bipolar of a basketball team as you're going to get. Sure, They have 7-game win streaks. I've also watched them lose 6 in a row, 5 in a row, and they're still 2 games under 500. On top of that, they're 6 games under on the road, and you're going to the United Center. Nobody stopped DeMar DeRozan in the last few weeks. He's had 35 in 6 or 7 games in a row. He passed Wilt Chamberlain for that mark. You got Zach LaVine, you got Nikola Vucevic. And in the first 2 meetings this season, the Bulls beat Atlanta 131-117 in Atlanta, and then they came back to Chicago 2 days later and won 130-118.
What about this? What about this Chicago team? Like I can't get a feel for them, Chris, in terms of who they are, tied Miami and all that kind of stuff. I don't understand. I know the injuries. DeRozan has certainly changed the game for them with Levine and all that. But what about this team? I just don't get at 38-21. I still don't understand how good they are.
Well, I think that you have to look at the fact that any team that can be 17 games over 500 at this point of the season with the amount of injuries that they had, and I mean, you look just at the number of games that these guys have played this season, and you look and you see that, like we said, they played 59 games. Let's take a look here. DeRozan's missed 4. Lonzo Ball has missed 24. Levine has missed 12. Vucevic has missed 7. Kobe White has missed 20. So you're looking at all these guys that have missed a ton of time, and they're still 38-21.
Right.
So obviously, Billy Donovan either knows what buttons to push with this team, because I can't even blame it on the fact that the Eastern Conference is full of bad teams this year, because it's not like previous years where it's not like previous years where you can win 45 games and be a 3 seed. So I think Chicago, they're a quality team right now. I think you have to put them up there with some of the favorites in the East. I mean, they're already pushing their over-under win total for the season because at the start of the year, preseason odds had Chicago, the over-under being 42.5 wins. So unless they go 4-19 the rest of the way, they're going to go over that mark.
Um, Memphis and Minnesota, and Minnesota. Talk about Chicago. Minnesota's got Cat, and you know what they have there. Memphis has, to me, arguably the most. He's recognizable, but underrated in terms of MVP. And John Morant, and you see what they're doing. They're on the road. This is a game. I don't know. You know the numbers better. This is a game where they need to win. Like this is a game you need to go on the road and beat this team only 3 games over 500. You need to, if you're gonna challenge Golden State and Phoenix, you have to go on the road and win this game. What say you about this game?
Well, I think Memphis is going to win the game. I mean, like you said, but the funnier thing about this is, and this is an interesting stat because you see the total is sitting at about 240, right?
Right.
Now, in the last 13 games on the road, Minnesota has seen an average total of 244.7 points a game. But in their last 12 games at home, and like we said, this is at the Target Center, they averaged 218.3. Now you're talking about a 26-point swing in totals in between home and road in that stretch. Who in the hell came up with the idea that this should be put at 240 when they're playing in the Target Center, given the way that these games have gone?
Right.
I actually like the under there, but I mean, as far as picking a side, I mean, now the line's down to 2 in favor of Memphis, which makes it even better because it was 3 earlier. I see some books it's back up to 3, and now they've moved the total to 241. I don't know what these guys are thinking, considering if you look at the numbers, it doesn't bear that out. I mean, Dylan Brooks is still out for Memphis.
What's the spread on in terms of the number?
Like I said, it's Memphis by 2 or 3, depending on which book you go to.
See, that scares me. Like I'm taking Minnesota. Like 2 to 3, I'm taking Minnesota. I would.
You would take Minnesota with 3 points against Memphis?
Yeah.
See, I go the other way because Memphis has a better road record than Minnesota has a home record.
Yeah, but it's the NBA.
I know it's the NBA, but you also have to look at some of the stuff. Memphis is 40-20 against the spread. That's only 1 game different than their record. Meanwhile, Minnesota is only 29, 28-2 against the spread. So, and like I said, Memphis is 21-9 on the road. Sadly, they have a better road record than they do at home because they're only 20-10 at home. Minnesota's 17-11 at home. I mean, and there's not a ton to scream about on the injury report either. I mean, Xavier Tillman's going to play for Memphis. Pons isn't, but he's not a major threat. And Dylan Brooks has been out for a while, and Memphis keeps winning anyway.
Denver, Sacramento, that would be probably an easy one if it. When you look at the injuries, though, that Joker had to deal with. Is this a sleeper game that they lose on the road to Sacramento, or Sacramento is so bad that Denver takes care of business?
I would hope that Denver takes care of business because I took them -4.5 earlier. Just to take a look, I'm going to take a look at the latest injury report. Yeah, the guys that are out for Denver are the same guys that have been out forever, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter.
Right. Michael Porter is getting – he is – man, if he ain't getting money that he owes money back to Sacramento. He had been, that injury has not healed, and he making a lot of money.
But at least he played some games. Now, who are you going to go after first to try and beat him up and take their money back? Are you going to try and have Denver take Michael Porter Jr.'s money back? Or are you going to have Houston go beat up John Wall and get back the $40-some million he's getting for not playing?
Yeah. That's a good point. But I'm just saying is that Joker is doing all the work, and you got 2 guys who could be a big 3, and they've had the injuries there to get it done. So,
well, on the plus side, though, at least Murray is hoping to be back by the end of the regular season, or at least in the playoffs, which will help them. Not that I'm a big fan of that because I don't like Denver, but I have a lot of respect for what Nikola Jokic has done in his career, and he's, like you said, he's tried to carry that team. His ability to be an effective passer as a big man at 6'11" makes him that much more dangerous. We saw him pass out of a double team to hit Monty Morris for that game winner against Golden State right before the All-Star break. And the other thing is, can Aaron Gordon do anything other than dunk?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I'm not a big Eric Gordon guy. Talking with Chris King from Winners and Winers here on the Batchelor News Radio Network. Get to Tony T. Mac McLean in just a few. Toronto at Charlotte. Charlotte, being here, they can score. They can't defend. And actually now, Chris, they hadn't even been scoring. And Toronto's on the road. You look at this team. Um, Charlotte's been struggling a lot just to be able to be in a game, and you have a point guard that's been getting benched with turnovers. What say you on this game?
Okay, so we're talking about the game tomorrow in Charlotte.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I like Toronto in that one. I mean, like you said, Charlotte, they can't defend to save their lives. That's been their biggest issue. I know everybody was high on them last month when they had that big winning streak, but you look at their last 10 games and they've lost 9 of them, and in that stretch they've given up at least 113 points in 6 of those games, and another one they gave up 111. So I mean,
going into All-Star break, they've been horribly bad.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at some of the numbers, and they gave 119 to the Pistons in their lone win in that stretch, and that's because they hung 141. But still, you have to take into consideration Detroit got 119 points. Detroit is the second worst scoring offense in the league, ahead of only Oklahoma City, and you let them score 119 points. What does that say about your defense? And now you're going to face a Toronto team that beat you a few weeks ago by 15 points. In your own building. The Raptors have had all kinds of momentum. They bounced out of the cellar in the Atlantic, and now they're right up there, right behind Boston, and they're only 2.5 games behind Philadelphia for the top spot. I think that Toronto's going to take care of business and send Charlotte to another loss, and may start the rumblings about whether James Borrego is the right fit for Charlotte.
Phoenix, 2 more games. Phoenix, OKC. OKC been a dumpster disaster. Obviously, with making trades and stuff. Phoenix with Chris Paul out for 6 to 8 weeks, they got to manage. You got a shooting guard that's going to have to play point a lot. Is this a start of them adjusting with Chris Paul out in this game against OKC?
Well, here's the great thing about Phoenix is, sure, you don't have Chris Paul, but you've still got Aaron Holiday, who you got at the trade deadline. You still have Elfrid Payton. You've got Landry Shamet, who's played the point before. So you've got other options that you can use. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City, like you said, they're a dumpster fire. They won't have Lou Dort tonight, who's their second leading scorer. They're supposed to get Gilgeous-Alexander back. He can't carry that team on his own. Let's be honest. And then they've got, Josh Giddey. He's played well as a rookie, but do you really want to have to go into a battle where you're going to face guys like DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker and all these guys when your best player or your second best player is a rookie? I mean, that's kind of like being a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest.
That's something T-Mac says all the time. Real quick, because I know you got to go. I want you to get
Actually, I've got a little more time according to my latest update. So
go ahead and finish up what you were going to say about OKC there.
Oh, I was going to say the Thunder have been horrible. I don't understand. All we hear is LeBron, passing on great words about how great Sam Presti is as a GM. What is he trying to angle for his next gig? Because he thinks that Oklahoma City will still be bad in a couple of years when his kid can come out and play in the NBA. The Thunder are going nowhere. I mean, they're last in the league in scoring. They're last in the league in field goal percentage. They're last in the league in three-point shooting. I don't know if they can successfully complete the layup line with any kind of consistency at this point. And now you've got to deal with a team in the Suns that just, it reminds me of, going back to the Rocky thing with Rocky IV with Drago when they say everything he hits, he destroys. Well, that sums up the Phoenix Suns right now. And they're probably going to destroy Oklahoma City. You could probably go out there and have you could have Ayton and Devin Booker and the three of us, and we'd probably beat Oklahoma City.
Yeah, yeah. With that being said, when you look at Golden State, they're 6.5 behind Phoenix, right? And Draymond's still not back. We look at West coming back. They're playing a Portland team that seems to be dumping everybody. They already got rid of CJ McCollum. Certainly, they're gonna get rid of Damian Lillard. If they get rid of CJ, they get rid of Damon. At 42-17, they're on the road against Portland. Is this the game that they need to have to make sure that with Chris Paul out, that they gain some ground on Phoenix? Because Phoenix, again, 48-10, they only lost 10 games all year. So is this the game where they just blow out Portland and then try to catch up with Phoenix?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. I don't think at this point that Golden State is going to catch Phoenix unless Phoenix completely crumbles down the stretch. 6.5 games with 20-some to go is a big number to try to make up. And like we said, the Suns, even though they don't have CP3, they've still got other guys that can step up. Meanwhile, you're looking at a Warriors team. Sure, they got Klay Thompson back and everything else. Iguodala's out again. Like you said, Draymond's not playing. At this point, James Wiseman is starting to look more and more like Sam Bowie every day.
Oh, geez. You don't want to be Sam Bowie. That foot issue, you don't want to be Sam Bowie.
But I mean, it's going to be that kind of thing where you took him and look at some of the guys that went after him in the draft that you could have had. It makes you wonder because look who went after him. You had LaMelo, and I don't like LeVar Ball's mentality, but his kids can play basketball. Sadiq Bey, I mean, he went at 19 and he's played quality basketball for a Detroit team that's not very good. You could have had Obi Toppin. You could have had Halliburton, who Sacramento gave up on, which made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I'd be interested to see what you and Tony had to say about that. Because I know he's behind De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, but how long do you think the Kings are going to keep De'Aaron Fox at this point?
Well, let me ask you this, just to switch gears to both of you. Two questions. The first is Zion. Okay, so I'm a Sixer guy.
Right.
Joel Embiid is 7 feet, 280 pounds. Zion is 6'6", 316 pounds, Chris and Tony. He's way overweight.
Estimated.
Right, estimated, right. So he's way. So is he gonna be Sam Bowie? Like, is he gonna be I can't or Greg Odom or he's gonna be committed? The other part of it is the question with the Lakers. Some Laker fans in this house, and you got to get something. You can't stay with this roster and think that LeBron's going to stay around in LA, even if he's got his movie things and all this other stuff. You don't think LeBron's gone. He's not, if it's not working, he going to bounce. And so I'm thinking like with Pelinka, the GM, that you're going to trade.
Well, Tony, let's just pick up where LA left off.
I think Pelinka just got into the line right quick.
But speaking of Pelinka, there's obviously now friction because LeBron wanted to have Westbrook traded to Houston for John Wall. Do you think that's going to lead to a fracture in that organization bigger than what we've already seen?
Well, they're not going to be able to make any major stuff right now because everybody knows that they're trying to, they're trying to unload. So it's not going to be so easy to, you know, get rid of a Westbrook or whatever. This is that trade coming back to haunt them where they gave up their future, and it's this is what they have now. Now the other question he was asking, I guess, was
He's asking about Zion originally.
yeah. Look, Zion. Unfortunately, Zion is more hot plate Williams than he is Bowie. At least, it's and the only thing I'll say is that he's still a baby, where this can be rectified. He may just be trying to eat his way out of New Orleans more than anything else. That's the sad part about it.
Right.
But his career, let's put it this way. I think he's still salvageable because he's a kid. I look at him.
Yeah, he's only 21, so.
Yeah, it's not, I could see if he was like, say, 26, 27 or whatever, and he'd been in the league. I mean, we really have not seen, we've only gotten like a tablespoon sampling of what he can do. I think best case scenario, he could maybe be, Big Baby Davis, and have a decent career. But see, again, it's on him now because
right.
Once you get a reputation like that, it's tough to shake. So he's got to, at the very least, he's got to be able to come back at some point this year. And you know how they talk about how the NFL players talk about how they want to put some stuff on tape. You literally don't have enough stuff on him to want to take a chance on him, and then you throw in the weight issues. He's backing himself into a huge. I mean, he's literally backing himself into a huge corner right now.
And think about it too, Chris. When you think about Odom and guys, even Yao Ming, even Shaq, all that weight puts pressure on your knees and your feet. So if you're undersized, he's 6'6", so we're not going to come across a lot of 6'6" people. But if you're undersized basketball 6'6", and you put all that weight on your knees and your feet, then that puts pressure on it. So I've just questioned. I don't know him, right? I've seen him play, being here in Durham, play at Duke, but I just question his commitment, Chris, in terms of A, if he wants to even be in the NBA, and then B, if he wants to be in New Orleans. Now, I said my son before, if you're out of the league and all of a sudden you want to eat, it's a different story. But if you're in the league, then and people telling you how great you are, Chris, then you get this sense of invincibility. But if you're playing in Europe and you want to play in the NBA, that's something totally different.
Well, I mean, that's true. And I mean, now you've got reports that Zion doesn't have faith in the front office. He's got clashes with David Griffin and everything else. He didn't reach out to McCollum after he got traded.
Right.
That led him to get roasted by J.J. Redick. He got
another Duke guy, by the way.
Right. He got into it with Alvin Gentry before last season, before Gentry got fired. You have to wonder, and the great thing about, like you said, Williamson is over the 300-pound mark right now. It reminds me of when they used to talk about Howard Ballard, the right tackle for the Bills, when they said he's 6'6", and if they say he's 315, but he's about a biscuit away from 350.
Oh,
and that's basically the way Williamson looks. And they're talking about he might not come back at all this season because he's not with the team. He's rehabbing in Portland. And it's like Tony said, you don't have anything really on tape. This is his third year in the league. He's played a total of 85 games.
And T, we always talked about mentors. Is there anybody anybody saying,
that's the other thing too, because I don't want to disparage the team, but it's sort of an AAU team because there's really who's the oldest guy on the team? Is Ingram still there?
Yeah, Ingram's there.
Yeah, so he's
a young guy.
Yeah, but with that roster, he would be considered a grizzled veteran, so to speak. It's let's put it this way. They asked him to be the face of the franchise. Unfortunately, he's sticking his face in some other things at this point in time right now. And it's a double-edged sword because if they try to trade him, what are they going to get for him? Maybe a warm box of cream of wheat, possibly, but for the most part, they're not going to get a whole lot for him at this point.
And a pick in 2029 or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the whenever again, and again, I don't want to turn this into a LeBron show, but see, LeBron was asked to basically carry his franchise and the league to a certain extent, and he was able to do it. And beyond then, Zion is 3 years in, and the only thing he's been able to carry apparently is a knife, a fork, and a spoon.
And probably a 12-pack.
And some biscuits. That's right.
But to your point, Tony, about the veterans, I mean, we're not going to count Garrett Temple because he's a role player.
Yeah, that's well.
So outside of McCollum, then you would be down to Valanciunas, who's 29.
Yeah, we'll see. At this, with the NBA, and see, this is with all sports, probably more so the NBA. You've got to have that sort of Yoda type guy. I always go back to Sam Mitchell, basically hanging out with KG those early years in Minnesota. And again, Sam was beyond Crash Davis at that point. He was his career was on. He was basically preparing for his coaching career. But especially now in the NBA, when you have a lot of young players, and he was, and let's face it, he was asked to be the face of that franchise. And hindsight 2020, you would have thought that they would have just picked up just someone, that's been around the league a while, just if nothing else, to keep telling him no on this and no on that. Now, the fact it speaks volumes that he literally and figuratively didn't reach out to McCollum, because that's according to that. Now
that's immaturity, really.
Well, it's immaturity, and it's just not knowing. Because see, end of the day, this is a job. This is your business. You can when you're at Duke and you miss classes or what have you, that doesn't necessarily come back on you. See, here you've got there's nobody to tell you no. Yeah, I mean, and his yes people are doing him no favors right now, because they're basically. I mean, look, his yes people might be might be making 12 o'clock runs to Pizza Hut for all we know.
And that's real talk. Chris, just the final thought with him, if he's not, and I know you got to go. If he's not,
you're good. You're still good. I'll let you know.
Okay. If he's not healthy this year, and you look at this team, like I said, the Pelicans have been very accommodating.
Extremely.
And extremely in this situation. If he's not healthy this year, I mean, what's the percentage of them just saying, you know what, enough is enough? We're not, we seen what happened to Arizona and the quarterback, and maybe they're putting it out there because maybe they don't want to pay him. They might do that with Zion. Like, okay, you in your rookie contract, we're not going to pay you. We bent over backwards. What happens with him, and who would want to take him?
Well, I think that's what Tony was getting at, is you don't know what you'd be getting. I mean, are you going to get the Zion you saw at Duke? Probably not, unless you count, his quadruple chin as his brothers.
Right.
And with nothing on tape, there's not a whole lot. Who's going to give up anything for him? Sure, he's a dynamic player, but can you guarantee he's going to see the floor? No.
Yeah.
Do you want to give up anything of value? Probably not. I mean, sure, like you said, he's 21. He'll be on the final year of his contract should New Orleans pick it up, which I imagine they will, because it's a team option. It'll be about $13.5 million for 2022-23. But even if you pick it up, nobody's going to want to pick up an expiring contract like that even next season because of the fact that you're basically just chewing up cap space for nothing because you don't know if he'll be on the floor or not.
Right.
And LA, the elephant in the room for that franchise. Remember, they're only a few years removed from having to go through this with AD.
Right.
That may be the only saving grace that he has to possibly hang on. But I think at this point, like Chris said, it's it's all on him. There's no pressure on the franchise. They can finish 16 and 58 with him, and they can finish 16 and 58 without him.
And the thing is that you have the John Morants and all these other guys coming up with these other franchises. If you're the face, I think it puts in a certain degree puts pressure on the franchise to say enough is enough.
Sure.
We can't do this anymore. You got John Morant. Memphis is right behind Golden State, right? So you have these young franchises and young players around, especially in the Western Conference. Donovan Mitchell in Utah. I mean, you got these different people. You got to be able to respond. Guys want not just to make money, but they want to make sure you in theory
he was looked to be a difference maker,
right.
When they drafted him, they were looking at, this is our guy, we're going to build this franchise around for the next 3 to 4 years,
right.
And they're basically like Charlie Brown on Halloween night. Now they got a rock,
right. And Chris, with that being said, the other question I had, Tony had mentioned Anthony Davis. Lakers are a dumpster fire, man. Like I don't even know what the numbers are. You might know the numbers of them even making the playoffs, let alone even winning the championship. And I don't necessarily blame LeBron, but I do blame LeBron. Here's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Here's what I'm saying. He had to sign off for this whole team, but when he signs off on the team, he has an opportunity to build on his legacy, and he may move. I'm a player's guy, so I don't really have a big problem with it. However, AD, as Tony will tell you, and now and you'll hear me saying, if they go as he goes. If he's healthy, they win. If he's not healthy, they don't win. That's it. It's really simple with this guy. He's a talented 4 or 5, a big. You call him a 4 or you call him a 5. So, Chris, my thing is, do they wait till he gets healthy and trade him? Do they not trade him? Do they even make the playing game at this point? I think LeBron is capable of getting them at least to the playing game. But at that point, do you move him? They only got 5 cents worth of trade bait anyway. So what do you do with him thereafter? And what happens with this squad?
Well, to answer your question, the Lakers are currently 9th. They're 6 games behind the Nuggets for the final guaranteed spot in the West.
They shouldn't be that high.
If the season were to end today, they would have to beat Portland in the first play-in game, and then they would have to beat whoever loses in the Minnesota-Los Angeles game just to get the 8th seed.
Wow.
Which would then put you against the Suns.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I don't think the Lakers are going to go anywhere, especially with Davis hurt again. As far as now, were you asking about trading James or trading Davis?
Davis.
You're going to run into the same problem that you're going to run into with Zion, is the fact that he's an all NBA player when he's on the floor. You have to take into consideration He's never played more than 75 games in a season.
Yeah, but he's played a lot more than Zion, though.
Right.
Again,
They're
there's
not
the
the
world,
same.
there's the
They
world, there's the
can't
world's
forever.
tallest midget. There's the world's tallest midget
right, but
analogy
they can't
again.
be in his. But Chris, they can't be in the same category though, because Zion is in his career. I mean, Davis has been around for a minute though.
Right. He's been around, but he also only played 36 games last year. He's played 37 this year. He played 62 in 1920. And his last year in New Orleans, he played 56. Can you get by? Can you justify, if you're another team, can you justify A, giving up draft capital or decent players, and B, can you justify paying almost $38 million next year, 40.6 in 2023-24, and 43 plus in 24-25 for a guy that could miss 20 to 25 games a year, which has been his trademark the last 5-6 years? Can you justify it? Let's say you're the 76ers. Can you justify giving up Tyrese Maxey, we'll say Matisse Thybulle, a first-round pick, some money, and we'll throw in Furkan Korkmaz just as a throw-in to try and get the salaries to equalize out. Can you justify doing that to bring him to Philadelphia, knowing that you'll have him miss a quarter of the season?
No, but I'm a Sixer fan, so absolutely no. No.
Now, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. You like the Knicks, right?
As soon as you
Yeah,
said,
I'm the one Knicks fan
as you
left in the
said-
state of Connecticut. Yeah.
Other
Listen,
than the people
so-
from Schenectady.
No,
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah.
Chris, as soon as you said Maxey, no, it was no. I mean, he was
You had me at no.
no.
Now,
We're not giving up Maxey.
let me put the same question to Tony. Tony, you're a Knicks fan. Would you live with the fact if they were to give up?
RJ Barrett.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there.
I was gonna say Randall.
No, I wouldn't even give up Randall for him. No.
Wow. Wow.
No. It's I know Randall, might have more tread on the tires, but again, that injury factor, and I know he's still somewhere. What is he? Right at what's Davis? 27, 28?
He is 28. He'll be 29 March 11th.
Yeah. That's.
I don't know.
This way. In a sense, they're sort of even, but I know. Let's put it this way. I know what I'm going to get with Randall. I don't know what I'm going to get with the Brow.
Yeah, you're gonna get with Randall shooting threes and doing crazy stuff as opposed to.
But you know what? I you know what? I can live with that because I know exact. And see, again, he's not.
But you're gonna trade him anyway, though. You don't want him anyway.
I'm not. Well, no, put it this way. I'm not ready to trade Mr. Randall. I'm not.
Now, I didn't know that about you.
No, those are other Knicks fans.
Those are the people at Schenectady that can't change.
Yeah,
can't change the channel because they lost the remote.
To be quite honest, it's the media folk that the same media folk that was heralding him last year are the same media folk that are trying to trade him this year.
But
So the Mike Lubick's of the world.
Exactly.
You've been very critical of Randall, not to the point where you want to keep her. It didn't seem like that. Like
but see, I'm not one of. I've never been one of those fans that looks through life through blue and orange colored glasses either. You have to. I'm you know me with most of my teams. I'm very critical. I'm not just gonna go with the company line. Look, they're already sitting down Walker for the rest of the year, which means that when Derrick Rose is hurt again, 15 games after he comes back, they're going to be down a guard again.
Yeah, I was going to say next week.
Yeah, well, not give him 10, 15 games. But see,
you're a better man than I am, Tony.
Yeah. Well, just masochism is a hell of a drug, as Rick James once said. But it's the whole construct was crazy. But to get back on the thing is, we all look. Davis is great, but see, there are so many players who are in the league strictly on potential. And at some point, you've got to say, I got to pay for what I know I'm going to get, not for what I may get. And especially going from LA to New York, no, thank you. You know, in the words of Oscar Madison, I'll take the spanking.
And to Tony's point, when you talk about what you're getting as opposed to playing the grab bag, the Lakers knew that A, when they traded for Davis, B, when they traded for Westbrook, you knew you were going to have a guy that would fire up horrible looking shots that had no chance of going in. He's a me guy as opposed to a team guy. He's all about getting his own stats to get triple doubles. Why do you think he shoots so many horrible shots that either hit the backboard or are air balls? And that's a flaw. And you've said it before, LA. LeBron signed off on this team, and now, like Tony and I were talking when you faded out, he's pissed off at Pelinka because they didn't trade for John Wall. I don't see how that would have been any different. Then you just would have had a guy who was making a whole bunch of money doing nothing.
Well, not only that, they could have got DeRozan, who went to Chicago, coming from Toronto to Chicago. They could have had him too. That's the other thing. Chris, I don't know if you know and if I asked you last week what the percentage was with Harden going to Philly, Simmons going to Brooklyn, what the odds are, and now and get your opinion specifically with Chris Paul being down for 6 to 8 weeks. I think I can't see my son's a Golden State fan. They all in like they're okay. Now we're gonna catch them. And you said 6.5 behind or whatever. But with Paul out, man, that puts a lot of pressure. I'm not being a homie. That puts a lot of pressure on Booker, not to be Chris Paul, but to take away his shots and facilitate instead. So he's going to take the shots, but now he's got to get more people involved. So what are the numbers on those three teams, if you will, or at least your opinion?
Well, I mean, the Suns, they're still the favorite to win the title. They're at plus 450. The Warriors are at plus 475, so they're right behind them. The Nets have improved to between plus 550 and plus 600 in most books.
Because of Ben Simmons?
Well, I think it's not so much just because of Ben Simmons. I think it's also because you've got Seth Curry, you got Drummond, so that helps shore up the center spot for them.
And also, there's rumors that they may rescind the
vaccine mandate. That's true.
Right.
Which means Irving could play in the Barclays Center, which would be a boost for them going down the stretch.
And I think I know you're not a big fan, but I think Dragic helps them though. I really do. Even
it'll help him in the playoffs. It's not going to help him right now.
Right. I know. But he can shoot. So go ahead.
And speaking of the Nets, I don't know if you're watching. With 7:28 to go in the second quarter, the Celtics 51, the Nets 32.
Yeah.
It is not pretty.
James Johnson had 3 fouls in 5 minutes. So.
Yeah, and so when you look at you mentioned all those, what about Philly in terms of their odds in terms of bringing in, they making the change that they had?
Well, Philly's at plus 700 to plus 800, depending on which book you go to. So they've got the third best numbers in the East, 5th overall. But you also have to take into consideration, Harden, I know he's a talented player. I know you think that it's great that he went to Philadelphia. But you've got to think about what they gave up to get him, not to mention the fact that he's been a malcontent. He forced himself out of Houston. Okay, that's fine. Then he wanted to go to Brooklyn. He went to Brooklyn. He forced himself out of there because he wasn't happy. What's he going to do now when you've got to deal with Embiid wanting the ball a lot, and you've still got Tobias Harris? Like you said, you've got Maxey, who you wouldn't deal in a deal for Anthony Davis. He's not going to be the number one option there any more than he was the number one option in Brooklyn. How is Doc Rivers going to deal with that?
But he wasn't the number one option when KD was there in Oklahoma City, though. I mean, so
yeah, but at that point he was a pimp pot who was still, a young buck in the league trying to cut his teeth. Since then, you got to remember Durant left. He went to Golden State. Westbrook was gone. It was just him. So he was the number one option, but they weren't going anywhere. And that's the other thing that scares me about Harden. And Tony, I'd like to get your take on it too. When's the last time Harden carried a team in a playoff series to do something of substance?
Okay.
Whenever he has big games, they're already down 3-0 or 3-1.
Okay, before you answer, just know that I'm not liking what you're saying, Chris, about my Sixers. But
well, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you any more than I'm gonna sugarcoat it for anybody else, LA. That's now this is called the Sugar Fairy Show with LA Batchelor and guests. I mean, if you wanted somebody, that was gonna tell you it's all sunshine and rainbows, you probably should have gotten Jim.
And unicorns, by the way, too.
Well, that too. Well, then you should have probably gotten Jim.
Mm-hmm. And the unicorn probably plays better D than Harden too, but that's another huge story in and of itself.
But the great thing about a unicorn is where that horn can get stuck, because if you watch the Practical Jokers, Sal Volcano will tell you it's up your ass and to the left.
Yeah,
you guys are not my friends anymore. But go ahead.
Well, hey, you kept me on for 2+ hours last week, and I nearly got scalped about it. So consider yourself fortunate that I'm even here. I mean, Tony even left last week. I come back from looking something up, and I'm like, "Where's Tony?" Oh, Tony's gone.
Yeah. Gotta eat, man.
Screw this, I'm gone.
Go ahead, T.
Well, now the question is about Harden.
Yeah, I mean, when's the last time you saw Harden do anything in a meaningful playoff game?
Those early years in Houston, but that
But that was a decade ago.
Yeah, no, I know. That was at least 2 Kardashians ago now. So it's this one again. You knew what you know what you were getting, and on the again, I will say this: on the surface, Brooklyn, wins. I think Brooklyn wins the trade because they give themselves a nucleus. Sixers are basically trying to win it this year with Harden.
Right.
They're going. This is not a. Would you agree with that, LA? That this is them saying we're going for the titles this year?
Absolutely. They are, and that's why I said. But that's why I said to both of you, I gave you the scenario, and Chris, I said, if you don't do Harden, just roll with it and try to get Damian Lillard in the offseason. But they didn't do that. They went with Harden, and so now they're going for it. Like Embiid stays hurt again. A real Sixer fan. He stays hurt. He hasn't been hurt. Even he's missed some games even this year, but he hasn't been hurt. So, but he's playing at an MVP level. So now you bring in Harden, and it's the hope that Harden is like, man, we know how he abandons. And I was teasing you, Chris, but we know how he abandons teams. But now, right? Oh my God, I got a chance to get a chip. Let me go with this dude. I'm hoping, as a Sixer fan, T, that it's this year. If not, we blew, to me, in my opinion, Lillard. I wanted Lillard in the offseason. I didn't want Harden.
You still could, because I'm looking at Harden as a rental. I would be this way. Even if you get the best case scenario and they win it all, I still look at Harden. I mean, he's basically Kawhi Leonard and them the North for a half a season, basically, not even a half a season. So right. It's a hell of a gamble. But see, if it doesn't work out, there's still the possibility of getting Lillard. Now you're gonna have. Only thing is, now you're gonna have to fight probably about 4 or 5 other teams.
Right, but we gave up Steph Curry. We gave up this.
He's a free agent, right?
No, Lillard's under contract for another couple years.
I thought he was a free agent.
Right.
Oh,
so
well.
Now we got to give up. To Chris's point, now we got to give up even more to get him. And by the way, T, Harden said he's not ready to negotiate what his numbers are. So he wants to be a free. So
Yeah, and there's the
that's a
kicker too.
terrible sign. That's a terrible sign because he should be. I'm not saying he should go in and be kissing people's feet, but
he
you know,
should. He's a pork chop waiting to sell. He better go in and get that money
you would
now.
think, yeah, you would think. But see that, yeah, that's not a. If that's the first words out of his mouth, then hide the women and children then because it's going to get ugly. It's
But
going to get real
that's the
ugly.
kicker too. Is Harden's contract? It's a player option, so he can choose whether he wants to take it at $46+ million,
Right.
or whether he wants to go somewhere else. So you've got the same issue, like you said, whether he comes back, and if he did come back, there's no chance in hell that you're going to get Lillard because of the fact that
Can't
not only
afford
is
it.
right not only is Lillard under contract, he'll make $42+ million next season anyway. He's under contract through 2024-25, so you could have waited and gotten Lillard for 3+ years, as opposed to getting Harden.
Chris, how do you is there any way around that? Because again, as a Sixer fan, I would have just wrote it out. No trades. Hey, we lost in the first round or whatever. And then we go after Lillard. Then we send Seth Curry and whatever to Portland or whatever. But now you're in a position now you got Harden. He's saying, hey, I'm not negotiating anything to the offseason. You got Lillard with 3 years on the contract. You really, this dude can come over half court and drop something. Now you got Embiid with him. He's not hard. So how do they fix? Can they fix that?
Not prettily. I mean, let's be honest. If Harden leaves and you try to get Lillard or something like that, you're gonna gut what's left of the depth that you have because there's no way in hell that if I'm Portland sitting on the other end of that line and you're asking about Damian Lillard, there's no chance that I'm not going to say, if I'm Neil Olshey, that Neil Olshey or Joe Cronin, there's no way in hell that I'm going to sit there and say, yeah, we'll trade you Damian Lillard for a bag of chips. Right. You're going to you'd end up having to give up Maxey. You'd end up having to give up, let's see. They probably don't want Harris because
at the very least a first rounder.
Yeah, and they already gave up one of those to the Nets.
Right.
So, I'd be asked if I'm Joe Cronin and you're asking about Damian Lillard. I'm looking at your roster. I'm going to tell you, knowing what you paid to get Harden, I'm going to sit there. I'm going to laugh. I'm going to tell you it's going to cost you Maxey. It's going to cost you Thibault. It could cost you Shake Milton.
And Thibault is
and it's probably going to cost you. It's probably going to cost you at least one first, if not two, and it might cost you a second on top of that.
Yeah, and you don't want to give up defense or offense. Maxey is your energy guy, and Thibault is the guy that's gonna shut people down. So you don't want to give that up.
Right, but in the words of Dire Straits, you don't get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. It's not the way it works in the NBA.
Right. I get it.
If you want Lillard, you're kind of stuck because you boned yourself by deciding that you wanted Harden.
And he's saying he's going to renegotiate, and so, man, that's just rough. That's rough for us in that regard, especially when you look at the young, promising talent, and with Doppin and RJ Barrett and guys, you don't want to give up all that young talent for some guy that might be there for a year or two.
All I have to do is remember, Isaiah may have been a great talent evaluator, but he didn't, he must have flunked math in school because with the cap, he was awful. I mean, I could never forgive him for Jared Jeffries. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I'm looking at some stuff from our friend Chris King. that has sent some stuff in. If you guys, I don't know if you guys can see it or not in the private chat, but I'm going to post what Chris King had put in there. So you can see, should have a few extra minutes.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, I'm keeping track of my clock.
Cool.
But as far as, as far as the 76ers go, I hate to say it, LA, because I know you're a fan, but they put themselves in a corner.
Yeah, they really did. They really did. And they did it, Chris, because of Embiid. Like, he's been hurt so much that now is the time. You got to go all out. The only thing is, like I said, I would have never, I've been saying this, I would have waited, just run it out. Whatever's going to happen in terms of the player and the team, you don't win whatever. But then I've always been a Lillard guy. So I would have just waited it out and see what I can get and trade what I traded to get Ben Simmons. I'd have traded that then and probably maybe a little more because Lillard is who he is. But
Well, maybe who's to say that they maybe didn't try it and then just said, and Portland basically just said, thanks but no thanks.
that's true. That's true.
But of course, but again, that's not going to help. That ain't going to help you right now, especially if you're, because again, this was I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but this was we are trying to win it all. I mean, they're basically trying to get back all the titles that they owed their fans from 10, 15 years ago in this one trade. And God bless them. It's going to be tough because
I think Moses Malone is irritated about that.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, this is so anti the process that the fans. The fans have got to be like, what the hell? Because they wanted Ben Simmons out, mind you, but now it's sort of like, what the hell just happened?
All you have to do now is just cue up Chuck Barkley going, "That's terrible," and that'll sum up basically what this trade was.
Yeah.
I know you think it's good because Harden's there and you wanted to have an impact player, but there comes a point where you give up too much. I mean, if it turns out where they win the title, then it'll be no different than what the Rams did with Stafford, giving up Goff and 2-3 first round picks. If it doesn't, people are going to look at this and say, "What the hell was Daryl Morey thinking?"
Yeah. Chris, real quick, because we're running out of time, but I know we all have to go.
Yeah, Tony's got to eat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, food's important. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
You look at college basketball, Gonzaga's number one.
Yep.
We've seen Kentucky up there, Baylor. I'm a UConn, as T knows, the UConn Husky guy. They beat Villanova recently. What are the odds, and what do you think in terms of top 5 or top 3 at least, in terms of who will on the men's side will be there? Because, like again, we've seen some changes, and I'm with Tony. And I said, Tony, and I'll say this to you, first time. I think that the NCAA wants Coach K to go out with a title. So they always put Duke, as you know, I say this to T, they always put Duke in the softest region so they can get to the Final Four. That's my opinion. I'm not a Carolina or Duke guy. I'm a UConn guy, but I'm in Carolina, so you understand that. But I think they want him to win a title on the way out. So with that being said, let's say your top 4 in Vegas is saying that will win a title.
Well, Vegas has Gonzaga at the top. I mean,
right.
That's not a surprise. I mean, you've looked at the way they've destroyed everybody that's been put in front of them for the most part. Their 2 losses were to Alabama and see, who was their other loss? Because I don't remember off the top of my head. I know we talked about it the other day.
It was.
They lost Duke in that game where Paul Van scored 20 in the first half and scored 1 in the second half.
Yeah. Right.
But you look at the fact that Gonzaga, they've won 23 games, right? 22 of them have come by double digits. They had one game where they won by 9. That's their closest margin of victory all season. And it came against Billy Gillespie and Tarleton State of all the friggin' teams that you're going to lose or win by single digits against. You look at who they've beaten. They beat Texas Tech, obviously a very good basketball team. They beat UCLA by 20, another very good basketball team. They beat Texas by 12. Don't even get me started on what they've done in the West Coast Conference. They beat BYU by 33. Game wasn't even that close. They beat St. Mary's by 16. They beat Pepperdine by 20 in a game where they turned the ball over seemingly every possession in the second half. Gonzaga, they're good offensively. They're good defensively. They're second in effective field goal percentage on offense. They lead the nation in effective field goal percentage on defense. When you play good on both ends of the floor, I know it's a real shocker to people. You tend to win games.
Yeah.
Number 2, they've got Kentucky at plus 800. I get that Kentucky, everybody likes them, but the thing with Calipari's teams is, there's too many one and dones on those teams. You don't build the cohesion that a team like Gonzaga does, where they have guys that are around for 2, 3, 4 years. And that's a problem with a lot of power schools. Is you get all these guys that are McDonald's All-Americans. You got 12 McDonald's All-Americans, but you can only play 5 at a time. I'm not necessarily sold on Kentucky. They struggled yesterday against LSU. They won. They didn't cover. And I think there's better teams out there. Arizona is a prime example of a team that probably is better than Kentucky. They're third at plus 850. Tommy Lloyd, he's done a hell of a job with that team, and he knows how to work because who was he an assistant under? He was an assistant under Mark Few at Gonzaga for the last 2 decades. He's done things with Arizona that Sean Miller only could dream about doing because Miller was a complete bust when it came to getting that team to do things in the postseason. Right. And then Auburn is number 4. Bruce Pearl has to be fortunate that they implemented that 1-year postseason ban last year when they weren't going anywhere anyway. But the Tigers, they've got to figure out how to play defense because we've seen stretches where they play bad basketball on that end of the floor, and it'll cost you in the tournament if you don't defend. Sure, you can run and gun with the best of them, but in the tournament, you're not going to beat teams 95-92 or things like that, like we saw when they played Vanderbilt or they hung 100 on Alabama earlier this month.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see that in the tournament.
Right, and I think it's different with in basketball when you, especially in the SEC, the Tennessee can upset Kentucky, and you don't know what you're going to get with Kentucky in the tournament. Obviously, I love UConn, and they just beat Villanova, the 8th seed, the 8th team. When you look at the dynamic of the men's side, I mean, you talk about the women's side, it'd be another conversation. Mm-hmm. That it's different. Like it's not as strong as it was 5-10 years ago, like Duke and whoever, and you've seen them in the Final Four now.
And I think that's great for college hoops because I think it just got to be a little boring after a while. I think it's great that it's wide. I mean, Gonzaga is clearly one of the best teams, but it's wide open. It's about as wide open as it can be. And oh, by the way, just on the other side for UConn, Paige Bookers has been cleared to return to practice on Friday, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, that's a boost for them.
Yeah. Because what the crazy thing is with the women, the expectation is not there. Who's to say that they don't, catch lightning in a bottle and then finally win the damn thing? Because all these other years when they've had, like Chris was saying, when they've had all the McDonald's All-Americans and the Wendy's second stringers, they couldn't get to the finals.
And the Burger King burger flippers.
Yeah. I mean, now the expectation is lower. Who's to say that they may actually not so much be Cinderella, but who's to say that they may make a run?
with some seasoned fries, by the way. With
He's getting ready to leave now. I already said this
There you
meeting out
go.
now.
seasoned salt,
Season
seasoned
salt,
salt
man.
fries. And again, I love the change. I just think that with the way you guys can finalize, we need to get out of here.
Yeah,
Um,
there you
Yeah,
go. Let him go,
I've
man.
actually got to go now. As a
yeah,
matter of
Yeah, he's
fact,
got to
I
go,
know
man.
you gotta.
Let him go. Let him go.
Right. The fact is that I've seen more Chris and then T in this cycle that there are more teams that'll be beating. I don't know if it's more adult or older players in these programs, or the talent has shifted from those programs.
It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think. You know,
I think Tony's right.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
again, it's a good mix because those years when it was just one team that just basically beat the hell out of everybody, it got to be, the tournament was sort of anticlimactic. Now for some things now, and that's a good thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I have to admit, I'll be the first to admit, I probably have watched more of the women's tournament over the last couple of years than I did the men's tournament. But this year, the men's tournament on the surface looks to be a little bit more, a little bit more meat to it this year.
Well, go Dawn Staley to her and what she's doing. Before you go, let people know how they can follow a Black Athlete Sports Network and all of your work. A very good work, of course, by the way.
It's www.basnnewsroom.com. We're on social media at Facebook at Still Soul Sports, and we're also on Instagram BASN_newsroom.
T, I appreciate you, man. I'll talk with you next week, man. Love you.
All right, take care, man.
Yes, sir. Tony T. Mac McLean. If you missed any part of the broadcast, make sure you go to our website, Batchelor News Radio Network.com. The audio version is the bachelornews.airtime.pro. You can watch it on Facebook at LA Batchelor. On YouTube, you can watch it also on Big Mind Entertainment on Fire Stick. You can watch it on IBM TV on Roku, and you can follow us on Facebook.com or Facebook PadNation.com too. Uh, iTunes, tune in wherever you can find it. You can find us, and we love to have you there on the Bachelor News Radio network and the Bachelor News Radio show.